I really can't pick a winner or loser in this comparison, and that's not what I set out to do. I kind of knew going in there's no clear winner or loser. The differences between these two guns are subtle and subjective. So I hope that what I'm able to do in this video is just show you those differences as I perceive them and as I can measure them, and let you maybe decide which one is more likely to meet your needs so that you can take a look for yourself. The published specs between these two pistols, the HK VP9 and the Walther PPQ, are so close, so similar, as you would expect. I mean, you can just look at the two guns, you can see that they're very similar in pretty much all their dimensions. We looked at the weight, which is very similar, only different by, you know, 1.5 ounces to 2 ounces. Overall length of the PPQ is 7.1 inches. Overall length of the VP9, 7.34 inches. Again, very close, less than 1/4 inch difference. The height of the PPQ, 5.3 inches. Height of the VP9, 5.41 inches. The width, PPQ, 1.3 inches. VP9, 1.32 inches. Definitely the closest specification. There's one other measurement that's not provided and not commonly tested that I want to test for, and it has to do with the overall feel and ergonomics of these pistols. Because they are so close, when you try to compare them, it comes down to the smallest and most subtle of details. So what I'm going to compare is a measurement that I refer to as the trigger reach. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure from the apex of the trigger to the apex of the grip directly behind it. I'm going to allow the caliper to compress the trigger safety. I don't want that to be a factor in the measurement because it's not really a factor in the feel. And on the VP9, 2.763. Now on the PPQ, we'll take that same measurement, .774. That's about as close as they come. PPQ with an empty magazine, 1 pound, 8.4 ounces, so just about exactly 1.5 pounds, which is their published specification. The VP9, also with an empty magazine, 1 pound, 10.55 ounces, so just a wee bit heavier by a couple ounces. Okay, trigger pull comparison. Starting with the PPQ, 4 pounds, 10 ounces. Alright, now we'll measure the trigger pull on the HK VP9. The 5-pull average on the VP9, 5 pounds, 15 ounces even. Almost 6 pounds. If you've ever heard me before talk about the PPQ, which I have definitely talked about, then you've probably heard me talk about the trigger a lot. And even if you haven't watched any of my previous videos about the Walther PPQ, you may have watched some others, and pretty much anybody who's talking about the PPQ is talking about the trigger. And we've already looked at the weight of the trigger pull, and we see that the PPQ is about 1 pound lighter than the VP9, and that's pretty much what I would have expected. But there's another aspect to the trigger that a lot of people are interested in seeing compared, and a lot of people are interested in as a measurement, and that's the trigger reset, break point, take up, crispness of break, and all those things. Now, a lot of that is really subjective, and it's going to come down to how that trigger feels to you when you shoot the gun. But some of it is pretty quantifiable and pretty objective. So let's try and take a look, and at least I can give you an idea what the differences are between the two. Let's look at the PPQ. The trigger pull on the PPQ from its starting position, we go back here to take up. So all of this is take up, and then super crisp brake. Pretty light brake, we've talked about that, but it's just really crisp. You know, it's just like a tiny vial of glass braking. The reset, very short. You could hear that click. You also get a good tactile feel. So the reset on this pistol is very pronounced and very clear and obvious. And then there's a little tiny bit of take up from the reset. And then that excellent brake again. The VP9, we start at the rested position, and our take up is right there. So a little shorter, but then we have a heavier pull and a little bit more grit in the brake. Take up, or the reset, pretty short, very similar, about the same, a little less tactile. There's not as audible a click, and there's not as, you don't feel it quite as much, although it's certainly a good reset. And then take up, almost nothing, and then the brake again. So between these two guns, trigger-wise, I still got to go with the PPQ as having the best overall trigger. You're going to have to get up pretty early in the morning if you want to have a better trigger than the PPQ. But that said, the VP9 is quite an excellent trigger. I mean, if I were not comparing it directly to the PPQ, I would be extremely satisfied with the trigger on the HK VP9. So I still say PPQ has a better trigger. VP9 certainly has a very good trigger and holds its own. Now, one thing to note is, if you can see, let me zoom in again here. So right down here at the bottom of the trigger, right beneath the toe of the trigger, you can see there's a groove in the trigger guard. And that trigger runs actually very close to it. If we see it in profile, it almost dips down in there. In fact, I think it actually may, during part of the trigger stroke, actually goes down into that groove. Now, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, I know I can count on you folks to post some comments. I believe the purpose for that is to prevent a duty glove from binding or snagging underneath the trigger, preventing you from being able to pull the trigger, right? So from that perspective, it's a well thought out design element, and it makes good sense. I know some people have complained that it causes them some irritation, that they get their finger pinched down in, with HKs in general, that they get their finger pinched down in here. It doesn't bother me, because the way I shoot this gun, my finger tends to be just like you see here. So I've got airspace between my finger and the bottom of that trigger guard, so it's really never an issue for me. But depending on your grip, your fingers, and how you shoot, if you drag your finger along the inside of the trigger guard, just know that that might be something for you to consider. Ambidextrous. I can pretend I'm left-handed. PPQ. Okay, general and random comparisons. My observations, general observations, differences and similarities between these two pistols. Both pistols have Picatinny rail on the front, accessory rail. The HK VP9 gives you a lot more real estate with the rail. Slide stops on both pistols are ambidextrous. You can see here on the PPQ, our left-handed slide stop. On the HK VP9, our left-handed slide stop. The ones on the PPQ ride a little bit higher up to the slide, and you can see that on both sides. HK a little lower, obviously. If the PPQ is a little higher, the other one has to be lower. But some people have either complained of or been cautioned by the fact that they're afraid they may ride that slide stop with their grip. That doesn't bother me. My grip puts my thumb well below that. But something to consider. You can see the height difference between those two slide stop controls with respect to the frame and the slide. If you think that might be a problem for you, the way you grip, try to get your hands on both of them and compare it. Okay, a huge obvious difference, unless you haven't been paying attention very much at all, is the magazine release, right? So our mag catch is drastically different between the PPQ M2, which this is, and the HK VP9. Now the PPQ M1, the older version, has trigger guard paddle style European magazine releases. Walther changed that to the button style, the more American style, due to market demand, or at least perceived market demand. So the PPQ, we have our familiar control right here for our mag catch, mag release. Okay, now I will say that about this control, it is an excellent control. I've talked about it before, so I'm not going to beat that dead horse, but it's large. The spring behind it is relatively weak, so it's easy to depress, and it really launches the magazine. So it's one of the very best mag releases on any pistol I own. I like it a lot. VP9 has the European paddle style, which by nature is ambidextrous, right? An advantage. PPQ, you can swap it to a left hand, but it's not ambidextrous. It's one or the other. VP9, ambidextrous. Paddle style. And I've talked about this already, but for me, I just go ahead and use my trigger finger like this, rather than try to bring my thumb around. But you can do it either way, whatever works. If you have never shot or handled a pistol that has the European style paddle magazine releases, try to get your hands on one and check it out first before you buy it, just to see, you know, if you think that's going to be a consideration or a concern for you, because it is different. And if you're going to shoot the gun a lot, it's something you're going to want to train with and get proficient at. So while I'm going on about small, subtle differences, the magazine base plate and magwell area of both of these guns are a little bit different. And you can see here in one versus the other, just sort of side by side. The PPQ, which is on top, has kind of a familiar, traditional, flat base plate on the magazine. And the magwell is pretty simple, nondescript, and it works just fine. I always thought, even when I compared the PPQ to the PPX, which is the less expensive model, Walther, I thought they did a better job on the PPX designing the base plate and magwell. The PPQ, this seems to be almost seems to be where they did an absolutely brilliant job everywhere, and they got down here and they were like, you know what? It's Friday. Screw it. We're done. Not that there's anything functionally wrong with it, but now the VP9 took a little bit of a different approach. They have the thicker base plate on the magazine, and they also have these detents on each side. If you need to do an assisted extraction of the magazine, you've got a place for those fingers to grab and pull. And you've got a little more meat on the bottom of the magazine to pull on. So if it were me, I'd say Advantage VP9. I think they did a nicer job designing that. They worked late on Friday and they got this part done. But there's nothing wrong with either one of them function-wise, but just know that that's a subtle difference. I have, however, bought recently Walther, genuine Walther PPQ magazine that has a completely different base plate on it, much larger. It's even got some almost, you know, pinky extension action going on there, and that makes quite a difference in the look and also the size. I mean, it adds a good solid ½ inch to the height of the gun. I neither love it nor hate it. It is what it is. I don't think it adds any value to a duty pistol. Certainly it adds no value whatsoever to a carry pistol. But for my 5-inch PPQ that I shoot for competition, works just fine. I don't mind using it for that. And actually, you know, it gives you a little bit of an assist, you know, when you're slamming a new magazine in. But there are some new magazines out there from Walther that do differ from the initial design. Another thing that's different between these two guns is the takedown method. PPQ has the sort of spring-loaded locking block area slide lock type takedown. That's right here. It's more attractive than it is on a lot of pistols. It's very subtle. It's got these nice polymer covers over it, but basically it's very Glock-like. Pull the slide back a little bit to relieve tension, and let it come forward, and that's it. The VP9 has a rotating lever takedown control, similar to, you know, an M&P or a Springfield Armory, if you're familiar with those. So what you would do with the VP9 is you lock the slide back all the way, rotate the lever clockwise, and then take your slide off. And then reassembly, you just lock the slide back again, rotate the lever back, and you're good to go. Both of these guns have front cocking serrations on the slide, so that's nice. Those of you who like to use those to either charge the handgun or to do press checks and that sort of thing, or if you just like the aesthetics of it, which is kind of what I like. Walther gets extra credit for carving their logo in there. Nice touch. As far as the cocking serrations go for both pistols, they're both very good. There's a slight difference in their design, but they're both about equal in my opinion as far as, you know, their grip. They both have a nice sharp edge to them. They both give you a really good grip on the gun to run the slide. Now the VP9 has added something new, and that's these little ears that are polymer. I talked about those in my first 100, but something definitely different that the PPQ doesn't have. So I had mentioned that, even though I didn't know whether I'd like them or dislike them, I actually like them. I think they're nice. I think HK's onto something there. So those are different. Both of these guns do have changeable grip components, and they both come with additional grip components. Small, medium, and large in both cases. And in both cases I have small on these two pistols. The Walther PPQ comes with 3 back straps that you can replace, and it'd be this part right here. VP9 comes with 3 back straps and 3 sets of side grip panels. So they also allow you to increase or decrease the width of the grip or the roundness of the grip, in addition to the angle and depth of the back strap. I did notice that the VP9 magazines load that last round a little easier than the Walther. Walther's not really a problem, but a little easier to get that 15th round in the VP9. One of the other things I've noticed with the VP9, before I forget to mention this, is the grip gives a little bit more when you squeeze it. You can feel it flex. You feel that polymer kind of flex under your hand. Because you have 3 pieces that are replaceable on the polymer frame, not just the back strap, but also the 2 side panels, I think that creates a little more flex, because that back panel and those side panels can compress, whereas on the Walther you only can replace the back strap, and once it's tight to the rest of the frame, it's tight to the rest of the frame, so there's not any additional flexing. You can see that the PPQ has a little more 3-dimensional quality to it. You see those swells, you see those 3 swells right there on the side panel. Those are nice. I like those. I like the way they feel. They provide some nice traction for your hand when you grip the pistol. VP9 is a little flatter. Doesn't really have that type of pronounced molded swell to it. Both of the guns do have sort of the handlebar finger grooves on the front. They're both good to me, and this is subjective. Everybody's hands are going to be a little different. They both feel very good to me in terms of the fit and comfort. So very equal there. Even the pattern, the stippling on these 2 guns is similar, but on close examination you definitely can see some differences. Now the PPQ I have referred to in the past as paisley, and I still think that word, for whatever reason, that's just what my mind thinks of when I look at that stipple design. It makes me think paisley. The VP9, although it's similar, doesn't quite make me think paisley. If I look at it real close, it kind of looks like bacteria under a microscope. So I don't know, but it's still very, it's pretty good grip. Both of them, neither of them are great. I tend to put a Talon grip on either one of these guns to really like it, but they're both good. Okay, another difference might mean something to you, might not. PPQ right here in the foreground has a plastic guide rod, polymer. VP9, now in the foreground, has a steel guide rod. You can get aftermarket parts and all that, but out of the box, PPQ, polymer guide rod, VP9, steel guide rod. Okay, as far as the sights go, they both have 3-dot combat style sights. They're both good sights. PPQs are polymer, VP9s are steel. So PPQs are designed better for one-handed charging than VP9. VP9 has the glow-in-the-dark, not night sights, but glow-in-the-dark quality. Walther does not. I don't really care about the glow-in-the-dark quality, so, big deal. I mean, it looks cute when I put the gun in the safe, but you know, when I take it out of the safe, that's long worn off. So I don't know. So the sight pictures are very similar, but it's easier to see what that means really from the range. Okay, both of these pistols have a loaded chamber indicator, and using snap cap simulated ammunition, let me demonstrate that. So the Walther, you can see the loaded chamber indicator right there. See that red at the back of the extractor. Now from a shooter's angle, that's actually pretty noticeable. You know, more when you're looking down on it, but that's okay, pretty noticeable. VP9 also snap cap dummy ammo. You see the red. Let me get the angle going here for you. This one's much harder to see on the VP9. Let me try and zoom in. So right there where my fingertip is, you can see a little sliver of red. Not nearly as noticeable as the PPQ. Doesn't mean a whole lot to me. I don't rely on a loaded chamber indicator, but something you might want to look at between the two, if that means anything to you. I think it's a little better on the PPQ than it is on the VP9. And while I have these things both charged, I can also point out that the VP9 has a charged indicator, or a cocked indicator, whatever, however you want to refer to it. When that striker is charged or cocked and ready to fire, you can see that red dot. And that's really just the back of the striker itself, I think. But then if we were to pull the trigger, and again we have a dummy round in here, you see that disappears. PPQ, no indicator. Okay, in the things that are very much the same but a little bit different category are the trigger guards themselves. Both of these guns have squarish or rectangular-ish kind of trigger guards. So the VP9 has a little bit more curved bottom to the trigger guard. PPQ is pretty straight across the bottom. Both of them have a good undercut. So the undercut at the back of the trigger guard is about equal for both of these guns. They both have serrations on the front of the trigger guard. As far as room inside the trigger guard for a gloved hand, both of them are very adequate. The room is about the same for both of these trigger guards. So either one of these with a gloved hand works really well. The HK VP9 and the Walther PPQ M2 are so similar in every way that I don't think you can go wrong with either one. Hand me either one of these guns when I'm blindfolded, and first of all, it's going to take me a couple seconds to even know which one I've got. They're that similar, but I'm going to feel pretty good about whichever one I've got. These are both just absolutely excellent pistols. It really comes down to personal preferences. I talked about a lot of things that are slightly different between the two, and so those things, if they mean something to you or they add up to a significant difference, that may make you choose one over the other. Knowing what your personal needs are, selecting the one that seems best for you is really the way to go. Both of these guns, as I've said before, are as excellent as excellence gets.